All right, so here we are. We're going to do like a CBTI mastermind or something to that effect here. Before we get started, we're here in the offices of the Coast Fork Willamette Watershed Council. They do great work preserving and conserving and restoring this little spot of Oregon that we call our home. So if anyone finds some value from this video, all three of us, I think, encourage you to check out the Coast Fork. Maybe even make a donation if you feel so inclined. Their website is coastfork.org, and you can donate at coastfork.org/donate. So should we just quickly introduce ourselves and then go around? Do you want to start, Daniel?
Sure, absolutely. So everyone out there, my name is Daniel Erichsen. I'm a sleep physician. I learned how to treat insomnia. Luckily, not all of us sleep physicians do that, but I got really good training during my fellowship, and that's how I got into treating insomnia.
Okay, and I'm Martin Reed of insomniacoach.com. I find that a lot of people with insomnia, they kind of lost confidence in their ability to sleep. So I offer these sleep coaching programs that kind of give people with insomnia the skills and support they need to get better sleep, like for the rest of their lives, because these are skills that we're going to talk about today, the CBTI skills. So that's what I do.
Excellent. I'm Michael Schwartz, and I am a sleep technologist, and I've been in the field for a while, and I have a background in psychology. And so I'm very interested in the insomnia side of things, and I do some clinical work, and I also have a website at sleeponq, it's a letter Q.com, and I offer information about an app that I wrote, and I do some podcasting and just try to get the word out about CBTI, which is the most effective way to address chronic insomnia. So I'm just glad to be here.
Awesome. All right, so I think we were going to talk about some challenges with CBTI, because although we all recognize it as the best treatment for chronic insomnia, it's definitely not easy. The techniques, when you talk about them, they're straightforward, but they're definitely challenging to implement. So I think all three of us have got some kind of implementation challenges working with individuals. And I think you mentioned that you had a couple that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I can definitely start. And as we were talking here, I realized that for a lot of viewers, listeners, the whole CBTI may be completely new. So
Absolutely.
Just extremely briefly here, it stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia. And I think I'll just want to mention the two key techniques that we all implement. One is called BedTyme or sleep restriction, whereby you limit time in bed, build up a strong sleep or a need for sleep that helps you sleep. And the other one is what's called stimulus control, or it simply means leaving the bedroom when you can't sleep. So you reassociate the bed with sleep, just so everybody knows a little bit. Now, that said, as you guys, I use these techniques a lot. And here's one. I haven't really come up with a way of really helping people with the following question. Say somebody is they're busy at work, they're coming home, it's now 5, 6 p.m., they're sitting, they're tired, they relax, and they have this thing called microsleep. For those people that are listening in, tiny episodes of sleep that you may not even be aware of, you doze off for a second or two, and that can add up. And as you guys know, that can really disrupt them at night. And except for the obvious thing to say hey, you got to really make sure you don't fall asleep. Have you guys figured out something something else that's can really help people stay awake during that challenging time to make sure that they then sleep well at night?
I think, and that's challenging because with CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, it's based on research and controlled studies, but in real life, people aren't in controlled studies, they're in real life. And so a lot of things affect them, and everyone has different challenges. And keeping awake during the day is clearly good for your sleep at night, because as we know, sleep is determined by wakefulness, right? How you have to be awake for a long stretch of time for sleep to be easy. And falling asleep during the day can be kind of insidious, where a person doesn't really realize it sometimes. They're sedentary on the couch, or they're just in a quiet situation and they start dozing, and they maybe don't realize it. They think, oh, maybe I would just doze for a few minutes, and maybe they were dozing for 45 minutes,
right? And
maybe even got into some REM sleep, part of that sleep physiology that kicks in after a little while, which can then be very disruptive for their night of sleep, and even leave them feeling kind of groggy when they do come to after a nap, if you will. But yeah, the microsleeps are challenging and very dangerous, of course, too, if they're driving and having these. I think things like just encouraging a person to look for opportunities to just get up from where they're sitting, just being on their feet, because you can't really fall asleep very easily on your feet.
Yeah,
it's I used to, as a sleep technician, occasionally do that back in the in the 80s. But in general, it's if the person can just be on their feet, and that takes a little effort and willpower. But if they can do that, they might find that they make it through the day, because when they're on their feet, maybe they'll go outside for a minute and get some light. and just try to keep themselves from falling asleep in the micro sleeps. But that can be very disruptive if they're working on their sleep at night to have some of those little micro sleeps during the day.
So getting up on your toes, definitely a good one.
Try not to get in a sedentary situation. Right. Don't get on the comfy couch with your blanket watching a TV show late in the afternoon, because I know it's going to happen. And so just encouraging them to look for other things to do besides that, which might help.
Yeah, I think that's really important to like explore like other activities that maybe wouldn't have that effect. Like I've had a client that always found it really helpful to unwind in the evening, like listening to music. But he was finding that as soon as he put the headphones on, like after 10, 15 minutes, he would really struggle to fall asleep. So in that kind of case, I'd say, all right, well, let's not use this like an hour before you're due to go to bed, because it's making you feel sleepy in 10 minutes. I mean, but we can use that to your advantage, and like 10 minutes or so before you go to bed, maybe then is a good time, because it helps you recognize those signs for sleepiness, those cues for sleepiness. So we can use that to your advantage. So don't see this as a bad thing, right? We're learning stuff here. It's all a learning process. So we know that this is really good for making you sleepy. So let's just like save that a little bit later on in the night and explore alternative activities that we can do. And I think being active is great. Can be the last thing that you want to do, but even just like getting up, just standing like you said, or just doing something that requires your body to move. So wash the dishes, just anything. No one's ever fallen asleep washing the dishes, I don't think. Right? It feels like you might, but I don't think you ever have. But also I think it's good to explore, is there an opportunity to maybe shift the sleep window? Like, are you naturally a morning person that's trying to stay awake too late at night? Or are you naturally like a night owl that maybe, like, this is the opposite. If you're a night owl, like, and you try and go to sleep early in the night, it's not going to work, right? So maybe you're just like this morning person who prefers to naturally go to bed earlier, and you're kind of fighting that with your sleep window. In which case, this isn't going to work. You need to maybe consider shifting the sleep window so it starts earlier at night and ends earlier in the morning. So that's always something I explore with people that tell me about microsleep. Is I like try and investigate what we call like their chronotype. If they're a morning person or a nighttime person, and maybe we've started with a sleep window that's not compatible with their like internal body clock. Their body clock wants to go to bed a little bit earlier naturally. So that would be the two areas that I would explore in that situation.
That's really good. And as we were talking here, a kind of follow-up question to this one, generally speaking, I think we're all kind of very hesitant about like gadgets and supplements and things like that typically do not work. This is the one where I'm pondering, and I have recommended, at least for people to consider, using like bright light therapy, like to keep you like alert. Do you believe in that? Could it be helpful in this situation, or are you kind of like, maybe not?
I do. I feel like light therapy can be useful. It's not, the end all be all, because there are other things that kind of set our biological clock, our timing, other than light. And, light coming from like a box or something isn't the same as natural light, where like it's coming at you from all directions, and it's like a natural set of wavelengths. It's not just like a specific range. But I think light can be helpful if someone, like a lot of times an elderly person would have trouble staying awake in the evening, and they're, maybe their spouse wants to do social things, and the person struggling with their sleep is falling asleep early, and that's problematic for their lifestyle. So a little bit of light late in the afternoon, I think actually helps a little bit. Right. It's not the panacea, it's not the end-all cure-all, but I think it does help, get outside a little bit, keep the indoor lights up a bit. I'm not a big proponent of someone spending a lot of money on their sleep. I think a lot can be done kind of naturally. And so I think that can help that type of person struggling with their sleep. And then in the morning, it's get as much light as you can as soon as you get up for your day. As soon as your sleep window is over, just blast yourself with light. I think that's helpful, especially in the wintertime with keeping depression issues down. I think getting good morning light seems to be helpful. That's just been my experience.
There's only really been a couple of times that I've talked about like this light exposure in terms of using it as a deliberate effect, like with the deliberate intention of trying to stay awake a little bit later. I just feel like if you're trying to time it in the evening. So say someone's got a sleep window of like midnight, and they get to like 10 o'clock, and this is when these micro sleeps happen.
So sleep
right?
window, just for everybody clear, that's like you're not supposed to go to bed before.
Right. So this is like, so this is like your earliest possible bedtime. So this is when you could be feeling really sleepy or really tired, but the start of your sleep window hasn't happened yet. So you want to try and stay awake to really build that really solid sleep drive that's going to help you fall asleep faster and get that really deep sleep. So say you get into, say your sleep window starts at 12 and you get to like 9, 10 o'clock at night and you're starting to get those like micro doses, then I'm like, well, do we really want to be like doing this artificial light now? I kind of feel like when you start to get towards the evening, and I mean, I know it can definitely be beneficial. Like, I know you were talking about doing it in the afternoon, but a lot of people say, should I do this at nighttime, like closer, just to slow things down? And I know that there's evidence to suggest it can be helpful, but it's such an imprecise science, and the last thing I want to do is tell someone, put that light on like at 9 o'clock for an hour.
Right.
And it shifts their their natural propensity by like a couple of hours. Yeah. And then we've got, okay, you're staying awake, and then you're staying awake too long. Right. And we're it's kind of like this rabbit's like den, you're just you can end up down this rabbit hole, and it can be, I think it can generate more problems than it solves. Doing it in the evening, but definitely like in terms of getting that morning anchor, you were saying, just get up in the morning, get that light, and during the day. But in terms of like the actually intervening in the evening to try and suspend it a little bit, I think it's just such an imprecise science, and there's more potential pitfalls than there are benefits. That's my take.
No, I love it.
Definitely. And some people might use the TV for light, and then that's kind of a slippery slope because 10,000 channels and comfortable couch.
That's true, and like the thing with the TV is, I don't think it's so much a light problem in terms of. I think it's more of like a potential stimulation problem. So I don't have a problem with people watching TV up until when they go to bed, because I often do that and I sleep fine. So I don't see it as a real obstacle. But I like to say, if you got the surround sound system booming and you put Saving Private Ryan on like an hour before bed, then you might struggle to sleep then. And it's not really the light. It's more like the content of the programming that you're watching.
Well, that's true. Like, a book can be like super engaging
exactly,
too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Let me follow up with this. I know on your Instagram page, Martin, I've noticed like a couple of I think the trend recently have been you talk about being active during the day, etc. And then in light of that, I just read a book by Sasha Stevens, who people who don't know her, I think she's really, really, really good. Sasha Stevens, really good books. But anyway, she talked about how what we do half an hour before we go to bed is probably just 10% of the importance. But 90% is what you do the rest of the day. I have an analogy. I'll maybe share it later. But what are your thoughts on that one? It's not so much what you do an hour before bed. It's what you do the rest of the day that's really important.
I mean, it makes sense to me. Absolutely. Because just looking at the proportion of time, right? How can the hour or the half an hour before bed have such a huge influence on your sleep compared to what you do for the other, whatever it is?
But do you agree with me that a lot of clients in your case, patients in my case, they're really focused on what should I do just before I go to bed?
Right.
Maybe not that important.
Yeah, and that's worth emphasizing for sure. Because it can be really easy to develop these sleep rituals, right? You're
exactly.
It's almost like a superstition. If I don't do this, then I'm not going to sleep. And when you actually examine it, you're like, well, what's the logic behind this?
A number of things have to be done in a certain sequence, or else sleep won't happen.
Right.
It gets kind of illogical, I have to brush my teeth first, and then I do this, and I take the dog out, and then it's and then if something gets thrown off, their sleep, the anxiety goes up so much that they don't sleep. Yeah. And I caution people about that. And be really flexible in the evening. Don't get hung up on things. Just kind of do low stimulus. Just kind of low light, hanging out. Reading is great, probably the best. Audiobooks are great because you don't have to worry about vision issues. But your question of daytime things being more important than the last 10% of the day, absolutely. I mean, sleep and wake are like that dualistic yin-yang kind of relationship. And so, your sleep is being affected the moment you get up in the morning.
Right, exactly.
It is, your circadian rhythm is 24 hours. It's not, 6 or 7 or 8 hours at night and then 10 minutes before that, It's all around the clock. And so everything you do is going to affect it. Meal times, how you feel psychologically, your activity levels, what you eat, what you drink, all these things affect your sleep. And it's not just, the last, half hour before you climb into bed having, like the only impact on your sleep.
Yeah.
So that's just my observation.
No, I think that's super important. And how about, like, we started talking about rituals here, things that, I guess how we would describe it as things that people do in an attempt to sleep that probably is not really doing much. How do you guys approach that when people have a lot of rituals? Like, how do you are you kind of direct confronting them, or do you like start like kind of probing them, or like exploring their beliefs? Or
a lot of the rituals, they seem to be kind of like put you to sleep rituals, like relaxation rituals that, they think is going to be like, they have to do it to fall asleep. Like they have to do their stretching, they have to do their breathing, they have to do their yoga, whatever it is. None of it's putting them to sleep, because I remind everyone I work with that nothing puts you to sleep. Nothing. There is zero anything that puts you into a natural state of sleep. And then I qualify it with, alcohol will put you to sleep, but that's not natural. A sleeping pill, that'll put you to sleep. That's not natural. But naturally, nothing puts you to sleep. Yeah. Sleep happens. You don't make it happen. And so by doing these things in the evening, I think promoting relaxation is generally a good thing. I think it's good during the daytime, not just in the evening, right? Less cortisol, it's like good for your system, good for your heart, everything. But in the evening, you want to be careful that you're not doing certain things for the purpose of initiating sleep. It's meant to get you relaxed. If you're doing some abdominal breathing, your goal is to kind of feel relaxed and calm. It's not to get sleepy or drowsy or anything like that. It's just to be calm. And then I know Martin, I think recently has talked about practicing in the afternoon, because these are kind of learned skills like breathing techniques and muscle stretching and contractions and things like that. Absolutely. Those are very mechanical kinds of things where someone should learn during the day, so that when they start to do it at night, they're not throwing in a little dose of performance anxiety of, not only their worry about the upcoming climbing into bedtime, but can I do this relaxation correctly? And then worrying if they're doing it correctly. And, that kind of performance anxiety can kind of be a little bit of a thing to be careful about. Yeah. So the whole general thing about rituals and all that is, life throws curveballs. And so you're going to, things are going to happen, and you just have to adapt the best you can and cope with them. Yeah. And CBTI strategies are the best for coping with things that life throws at you, so you don't deteriorate into, ongoing chronic insomnia.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to examine what the real motivation is behind the rituals, okay, so let's just take stretching, for example. Okay, why do you decide to do stretching at night? If someone says, it just helps me relax, helps me feel good, that's fine. No problem with that. Right. But if someone tells me, I do it to help me feel sleepy, or I do it to help me sleep, or someone will exercise, they'll say, I have to exercise. Exercise is great, right? Movement is great. But if someone tells me they exercise to exhaust themselves to help them fall asleep, then that's a red flag. So rituals in themselves, I mean, they're fine as long as the motivation behind them isn't sleep.
So how about if somebody says that I stretch like 40 minutes to make me sleep? What's your next follow-up question, or how do you explore that? Okay,
well, I would ask, does it work? Right. Are you falling asleep after doing your 40 minutes of stretching? Right. I'm guessing it's probably not working as well as you're hoping, because we wouldn't be talking, right? Exactly. So if you find it helpful and you find it relaxing, there's no need to stop doing it. But it's just about kind of changing that mindset. Don't see it as something that's going to lead to sleep, because it doesn't, because we wouldn't be talking.
Right.
But you don't have to give it up. If you find it enjoyable, if you find it pleasurable and it's relaxing, then keep going. But just don't see it as like this crutch for sleep.
Do you sometimes do like, let's do an experiment, try not to do it for a week and see what happens, or something like that?
Yeah, I do suggest experiments quite a lot of the time. Yeah. For something like that, though, if someone says that they're enjoying doing it,
then why take it?
I say, why stop?
Absolutely.
But if someone is really like hung up on, no, it's impossible for me to sleep unless I do this, then I'll say, well, how about we try, like, maybe just do it, say you said 40 minutes, right? Yeah. Let's just say, how about we try 20 minutes, or just not doing it, and for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then see what effect that has. Yeah. Because when we're working with people, like, we have them fill out sleep diaries. It's like a core part of CBTI. It won't work without some kind of log or journal. And it's really helpful because you can do these experiments and then actually go back instead of trying to remember what your sleep was like last week. You've actually kind of like got this lock and you can really trace progress and see if something is having an effect on your sleep. And most of the time these rituals aren't. They may be helping in terms of relaxation, making you feel good, but they can also introduce anxiety and stress. You know, like I have a client that tells me that they deliberately won't go out with friends because they have to be back in time for the start of their sleep window. You know, so this is kind of, or they have to be back not only for the start of their sleep window, but for their hours worth of wind down routine and doing their like stretching, yoga, meditation, tapping, and all the different things they do. So it's really important to just, if you actually go out and you're active and you hang out with friends, sure, you might not get back till late, but this is doing great things for your sleep drive. Like as long as you make sure that morning anchor, the end of your sleep window, you still get out of bed at that same time. There's way more benefits to going out, having fun with your friends, socializing, and living your life, and not letting insomnia live your life. And doing that instead is just so much more important.
That's so true.
Listen, I wanted to get back to something you said, Mike, and I think that something really valuable could come out of this discussion. So you said, you know, only our sleep drive can build like our natural sleep, right? Put us to sleep. Alcohol and medications can induce kind of a not natural sleep. How about this? I want to explore this. What I've been starting to say lately is that actually, no, medications cannot put you to sleep. And, you know, I think I shared this with you, but, you know, opening up again, I've started to use this analogy whereby, you know, the guy has pain, you take away the pain with the pain medication, they can now walk up the stairs, but it was not the pain medication that actually made them walk up the stairs. So would you also say that it's actually not the medications that make you sleep, or?
Yes, I agree that nothing puts you to sleep, and medications don't put you to sleep, but I think different ones maybe get closer to that than others. You know, enough of a medication will do that. I mean, enough alcohol will put the brain to sleep. Enough, you know, Ambien, you know, can put the brain to sleep in dangerous levels.
If you have some sleep drive, right?
Right, of course.
If you woke up after 8 hours in the morning, even if you took like a bunch of Ambien, it wouldn't work then because you
probably
have zero
not. I don't know.
Drive,
I've never seen that, and I would never recommend anything like that. But yes, your point is exactly right on. And I think, you know, what causes sleep is wakefulness. With a secondary thing of your circadian rhythm has to be kind of in its right place. So the two of those together, kind of the interplay of, you know, your natural sleep drive, your homeostatic sleep drive that builds up while you're awake, and your circadian rhythm kind of lining up. When those align and there's absolutely 100% no effort to sleep, that's when sleep tends to happen. So yeah, I mean, medication and all, those are all, it's just a slippery slope. And I think it can lead to all kinds of other problems, you know, and I think also, you know, with zolpidem in particular, I don't think the effect was all that big. When they did FDA testing, I think the average time to fall asleep wasn't that much shorter with zolpidem. It was like 10 minutes maybe on average. And they probably looked at tens of thousands of people. That's a really small effect size for that. And so then the question is, how much of this is psychological? And I think personally, a lot of it is, maybe most of it.
And by the way, you may not know that, I don't know this, but quoting those studies, do you think that's estimation of sleep, or is it actual like objective?
No, I think it was objective. I think it was polysomnographically recorded with EEG.
Which actually, now this whole discussion segues to kind of my other, like I had this other challenging question in my mind. So I've been talking a lot about this, how like, to me, I feel nowadays that the biggest problem with any sleep medications is that if they don't quote unquote work, well, that's actually good. Like they didn't work, like you move on, you try, hopefully you get into CBT, what we're talking about. But if they quote work, then people start believing that the medication is making them sleep, and it erodes their own sleep confidence. They start believing that I can't sleep, it's the medication that makes me sleep. So I did like a YouTube video on this, and then I was kind of stumped by this question I got. This guy named Ahmed asked me, so what do you do if you're already in that state? You're already believing that a medication is making you sleep. Like, how do I move on from that belief? Like, and I was like, I didn't really have a good answer.
It can be difficult because you can become really convinced that it's impossible to sleep without this medication, right? So with something like this, I find it's helpful with CBTI, we know that it works if you are taking sleeping pills, and we know that it works if you're not taking sleeping pills. So if a client comes to me and they say, I'm taking sleeping pills every day, but I don't want to become reliantly sleeping pills, then I say to them, all right, well, let's do the CBTI, implement all these techniques, and let's see if maybe this gives you a little bit more confidence in your own ability to sleep. You don't have to come off the sleeping pills yet. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there's no need to, okay? But what I find tends to happen is that as people implement these CBTI techniques, they get a little bit more confidence in their sleep. They learn what it feels like to feel naturally sleepy again. They know what it feels like to wake up like feeling a little bit more energized and a little bit more refreshed. And then that kind of prompts them to be like, all right, maybe like one night this week, maybe on an easier night, like maybe on a Saturday night, I'll take like half that pill, you know, or they'll talk to their doctor and come up with like a really like long-term tapering off plan, right? But it's just about reintroducing this confidence in their own ability to sleep again. I find that that's an more effective than just saying, well, you can sleep.
Exactly, right?
Right. Because your belief and your trust in this ability can be so eroded, you know, that you are convinced that you can't sleep without these sleeping pills. And it's also worth just saying, well, do you remember a time when you could sleep without them? So you know that you can, because maybe not right now. That's your feeling. I'm not going to argue with you if that's how you feel. But think back about when you slept and you didn't need the sleeping pills. So that's evidence that you can sleep without them. We just want to slowly get you back to that stage of like self-belief again. And that's what I find is helpful when people have like really lost that ability. Is just like implement the techniques, not put any pressure on yourself to like come off the pills. Just implement the techniques and just see how it affects like your confidence or your self-belief. And I find that when people are really good about implementing the techniques and they see them working and they see their sleep improving, then they naturally want to experiment with tapering off of the medication.
Right. And I think it's also helpful to explain to someone about rebound insomnia, which can happen. It doesn't always happen, but it can when, you know, they're taking a medication consistently for sleep and then they stop one night. Maybe they just get so frustrated they just say, I'm just not going to take it anymore. I don't like the way I feel. And then they barely sleep. At least their perception is that they barely sleep. They probably do sleep a little more than they thought, but their perception is that they didn't sleep at all. And then they go right back on it. And that kind of confirms in their mind that they need it. And that doesn't happen all the time, but some people, it's a challenging little an extra thing to kind of deal with when you're talking about medications. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, like when I started this earlier, I said it works. CBTI works if you take sleep pills. It works if you're not. The only time it doesn't work is if you take sleeping pills contingently. Okay, so say you've decided, instead of like taking a sleeping pill every night as prescribed by your physician at whatever time that you were told to take them, you decide, okay, tonight I'm not going to take them. But then you wake up and you're struggling to fall back to sleep. Then you decide, oh no, actually, now I'll take it. Because then every time you do sleep, you directly attribute that sleep to the pill. So my opinion is CBTI doesn't work if you're going to take sleeping pills contingently. Okay. But if you're taking sleeping pills as prescribed through the course of the treatment, CBTI will work. If you're not taking sleeping pills at all, CBTI will work. The only time there's that interaction between sleeping pills and CBTI and it won't work is if you do the sleeping pill, when you take sleeping pill contingently, because all you're doing is just reinforcing this belief that you're only sleeping because of the sleeping pill rather than your own ability to sleep.
And that middle of the night sleeping pill administration can be so difficult for someone because they do a lot of, I just call it mental gymnastics about, you know, should they take it? Should they not take it? And what time is it? And then do they have enough time to take it? And should they take half? And all that, I just call it mental gymnastics. They're just tearing themselves up. And I encourage them, especially if they take one before bed and then often in the middle of the night, to focus on that one first. The middle of the night one I think is easier with CBTI being implemented to drop. Because it takes a lot of the pressure after a couple nights. They feel like, okay, well, I'm going to try something different. And so they don't have to then go into that, you know, the thought process of should I or shouldn't I take one. And I say at the start of the night, that medication, like, I think it's better to, I found it helpful to focus on that second, as a secondary focus for their medications, ultimately with the goal of not needing anything for sleep. And that's always the theme of, working with someone. That's the ultimate goal, is not to rely on anything. But the middle of the night one seems to kind of tear people up, more than the start of the night one, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
What are your thoughts? What was the advice that you gave to this individual?
I can't remember. I think if I look back, I think I talked to you about this, and I honestly can't remember what I told him, but my kind of conclusion, or like what I came up with myself, was very similar. That you just have to the first thing to do is rebuild your sleep confidence and not focus on the medication and then come off it. I think it was
confidence is huge when it comes to sleep. It really, really is a huge thing, and people lose it. And it's sleep is a very natural process. And when something natural becomes difficult, that creates a lot of anxiety. Building up confidence is something that I think is helpful to point out as you're going along working with someone, looking for little steps, little small progress, and really like acknowledging them and congratulating them and saying, like, do you see this? Like, and sometimes it takes a little bit of conversation for them to understand that, maybe I did make a little progress and maybe I should allow myself to feel okay about that, because sometimes people with sleep troubles, they're just so convinced this is who they are now, and that's how they define themselves in a lot of ways, to then change, their own attitudes and beliefs about themselves. That can take some time. So as a sleep coach, it's something we point out when we see it, and I think that helps them in the long run as well.
Another thing I thought we could talk about here was it's always interesting to talk about things that maybe you have a little bit different takes on, you disagree a little bit, or like a little, and so one of them is light, like in your opinions, or let's say you go to bed, you wake up, and you, as we all advise people, like if they're frustrated, can't go back to sleep, then leave the bed. What should you do at that point, and how important is light?
You want to go?
Shall I go? Okay. So here's what I feel about light. We're all told to keep light low at night, but there's a second part of light, and that is the type of light. It's the wavelength. It's the color or the temperature. Sometimes people call of light. You can imagine like cold, harsh kind of light coming off maybe your computer screen in a dark room, or a fluorescent light, kind of those curlicue fluorescence. That kind of light, it's more alerting, and it tends to suppress like melatonin a little bit more. Not that that's the end all be all, but it's kind of more of a harsher light to be around compared to what we call incandescent light, which is heat generated. When you heat something up enough, it starts to glow, and that's incandescent. Firelight is incandescent. And so that kind of light, because it's been around since pretty much man has been around, doesn't seem to impact their chemistry as much adversely when it comes to sleep. In other words, it doesn't suppress their melatonin very much. So I do encourage people to use an incandescent light source. Literally like, an old light bulb and an old lamp, and they're on the couch and they're reading if they're awake at night.
Exactly.
I think that's as high tech as it needs to get. And I do think it helps to have that kind of light, that wavelength of light, if they need light at night, to use that kind. Obviously backlit screens, they're pumping out all kinds of other frequencies of light that the brain only sees during the day, morning kind of frequencies of light. And I don't think that's natural. And so I'm kind of a big proponent on like, let's try to figure out what is natural, which is a very difficult, if not impossible thing to do. But you can at least kind of try. And to me, the light thing makes sense. Electric light invented, late 1800s, and then fluorescent light and all kind of stuff. That's not something I think we've really adapted to. And so I think if you do need some light at night, keep it low and keep it incandescent. And that's pretty much where I leave it with people. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I would agree with almost all of what you've said. When it comes to light, I feel that it's more important to get natural light exposure during the day. I'm less concerned with like the devices. I'm more concerned with getting people access to natural light during the daytime. So like being outside, because I think that has had more of an impact on our sleep system than the invention of the light bulb. I see it more of, they're still related, because what happens is we get up, maybe it's dark outside, we get in the car, we drive to work, we're in an office, artificial lighting, we maybe eat lunch at our desks, We go home. If it's wintertime, maybe it's still dark, right? And then we're back in our house under light. So we've got no sunlight. We've got no like alerting system to our circadian rhythm to help it like regulate itself. So I think that has more of an impact, like this insufficient natural light. That concerns me more than device light or like the type of light bulb you use. But they're definitely connected. Like, I don't have a problem with people if they wake during the night, you know, and we want them to get out of bed when they can't sleep. If the motivation for getting out of bed is to watch TV for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I say go for it. But if someone tells me they want to, if their motivation is to fire up the iPad or the laptop, then I'll be like, maybe we can do the TV instead. And it's, part of it is the light, because I think the light is more powerful from these devices because it's closer to your face than the TV is. But also, like these iPads and the laptop, oh, maybe I'll just check my email. Maybe I'll just check Facebook. Maybe I'll just check Twitter. And that has way more. That has way more of an effect on your alertness level than I think the light does. But I think there is definitely a place for it. I think it's generally advisable to not try to sleep under a bank of 25 fluorescent lights or in a UV tanning bed. That might not be a good idea, right? But they're extremes, right? I don't think it has that big of an effect as sometimes we worry about. But I really encourage people to like get that daytime light. I think that's really important.
And that's such an important point you made during the day. With our modern society, we're indoors so much. And even when we're indoors with big windows have like UV filter in them. So you're not getting those ultraviolet lights, which sound kind of scary, but they're natural. And to get them in the morning is very natural. If we're not in direct natural light, like sunglasses off, outside, you know, not staring at the sun, but just like being outside for a little bit periodically during the day, your circadian timing is going to be kind of, you know, wondering where it's supposed to be. And then at night, I think the incandescent light, I kind of use that suggestion as, I'm going to give it away, a little bit of a ploy, because if someone is told just a regular old little light bulb and a lamp, it by definition means no TV, no iPad, no screen, no email checking, no rabbit hole of just, you know, stuff with, of course, the time displayed everywhere. A little way to kind of force them to go in that analog route if they're out of bed in the middle of the night, whether it's crossword puzzles or reading or audiobooks or listening to music or whatever it is, with the instruction, you know, sometimes because they've read so much about the light thing, you know, everyone's heard of the blue light. It's like the monster, right? No blue light. So if I suggest to someone, you know, maybe try something a little more analog, and the blue light comes off your screens, a lot of that kind of, so let's just leave those alone for the light thing itself. You know, because if you say, well, the light's not a problem, and, you know, they might think, well, I can just check my email a little bit, like you were talking about. And that's just a slippery slope when you get into like the social media, email, texting kind of thing. And those devices are clearly more of a problem for sleep than a TV, which is just kind of showing some shows to kind of distract you and take your mind off the fact that you're awake. Absolutely, 100%. So, daytime light is, of course, we talk about the, you know, daytime things affecting sleep, and that's huge. You know, with modern society, people don't go outside very much. I know they've studied it, and I don't remember the exact numbers of what they've found, but people are indoors way more. And then you can throw in temperature as well, constant temperature, constant light, you know, constant comfort. Everything is very constant. And sleep and wake are about the most opposite things you could ever do. Be awake or be asleep. They're completely polar opposites. And so if when you're awake, you're kind of just this, you know, maybe your sleep won't go deep sleep, REM, and all this other kind of stuff. It's kind of more just flat. I don't know. It's just kind of my. I'm just pontificating here. So you put a microphone in front of me, I'll just start talking. So
what's your opinion? I'm interested.
Definitely. I'm like, as we're speaking here, I'm like, how can I word it the best way? But I've started to think a lot about like distraction, and I know you guys also talk about this, but what I feel is like, when somebody's frustrated, they can't sleep at night, and we tell them to leave the bed, I've started to feel that the most important thing is getting them to not think about sleep. And I've started to feel like, if that means that you're on your computer and you're just not thinking about sleep, then that's better than being in an environment that may be more sleep conducive, but just makes you think about how I want to sleep. So that's when I started, you know, or if you asked me like a year ago, I'd be like, I think more the classic recommendation, which would have been like, keep it kind of dim lit, don't do anything engaging and stimulating. But I found a lot of people tell me like, I leave the bed and I go to this place that's dark and I just get annoyed because I want to sleep. So that's why I'm trending towards feeling like whatever you do, just make sure it distracts you from trying to sleep. Mm-hmm. And I thought you talked about that too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the first things first is you remove yourself from the bed.
Yeah.
That's, stimulus
big.
Control 101. Like you're awake and alert, you're tossing and turning. We need you not to be there anymore because your brain is going, here means anxiety, here means frustration, here means alertness. Get out of there and go over here. Maybe it's the living room, maybe it's a couch, maybe it's a chair in the bedroom next to their bed, whatever it is. And then I just kind of like to say going analog, I think is helpful. It's not super exciting, but I always make sure I qualify it with do something you don't mind, like you kind of enjoy.
Exactly.
Like a book. If there was a book out there that you didn't like, you're not going to get out of bed, right? If you had to go like scrub the floor, you're not going to get out of bed. If you whatever, it's got to be something you don't mind doing.
Exactly.
Like a crafty thing, or maybe a puzzle, or part of a book you're kind of into, and that you're then more likely to get out of that bedroom environment, which is really the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to get out of the bed. Secondary is do something that doesn't keep you awake for longer.
Yeah.
So I just say don't try to bore yourself.
Exactly.
Like one guy, I don't know if I ever told you, he got out of bed and he said, I'm going to. He put a dot on the wall. And he said, put a chair in front of it. He's going to stare at the dot for as long as he could. And I'll never forget this guy. It was years ago. And I was really just amazed at the time because it was kind of my first, when I was first getting more interested in like actually CBTI and chronic insomnia and all that. And I thought, okay. So then I had to know, like, how long did you make it? Because I'm picturing myself doing it. How long could I make it? I think he said like 25 minutes. No. I haven't really tried it formally, but I think I'd probably make it about 2 minutes. And then I'd probably just scream and do something. And so that doesn't work, and you have to do something you don't mind doing to take your mind off of sleep.
Yeah. Not
the bank of fluorescent lights. It's just kind of that leave the bed is the first goal. And we can talk more about stimulus control and that in a moment. But that's the first goal. The secondary is just do something that you don't mind doing. Because like on dark, cold winter nights, the bed's so warm and comfortable. It's like you don't want to get out of bed. And I get it. I completely get it. But if you're awake and alert, you don't want to be there for very long. Get out of there. Find something to do, stay warm, have a little snack, all these kinds of stuff. I'm like, enjoy the time. It can be a very creative time. The brain gets more creative at night. And that can be, like poets and musicians and stuff. They stay up late because their mind changes. They'll stay up all night. And the brain changes into a more creative, kind of non-rational kind of organ in our body. Yeah. And that can be helpful for some things like creativity. Yeah. So, use the time enjoyably. Yeah. And some people like journal or crafty things and they find it's nice.
I think you have to take a collaborative approach, right, with the person you're working with, right? Yeah. Because I know for me, if I went on my laptop when I couldn't sleep, I would be on the laptop all night because I like enter this rabbit hole. I'll have like 25 tabs open. Oh, this looks interesting. New tab, right? My laptop's a nightmare. Like I have like 20 windows open at any one time because I'll read something and then I'll go off into that and I'll feel sleepy, but I'll be like, oh, I'll just finish reading this page and I'll be going down that page. Oh, a couple more links and then some new windows and so it just doesn't end. But for some people, it's the opposite, right? Yeah. Some people, they'll be like, oh no, I'll just read like this blog that I'm really into. Exactly. And I'll read that one page and then I'll start to recognize the cues for sleepiness. So for them people, I'm not going to say, no, you can't use your laptop during the night. Right, if that's helping you get out of bed. Right. And if you are that person where you can just read a blog page, and not be tempted by all the other programs on your computer and you can recognize the cues for sleepiness and then return to bed, have at it. Yeah. Like there's no need to change that. Yeah. But I think for the majority of people, it's more stimulating than relaxing when you're on these devices that there's just so much potential distraction there.
True. Right.
But that's from my own experience.
And the brain isn't really set up to deal with like a lot of that kind of information you can get from your computer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And at night that can be frustrating and that can just add to the kind of general like frustration of and I'm awake and now I'm like reading about things that make me mad and so it's kind of like like little story kind of things, blog things that they enjoy. It's great stuff.
Well,
Absolutely.
Going back to that point, you've got a problem is what if someone starts to Google about insomnia when they can't sleep? All the poor bad advice that's out there, that's going to make it even worse. There's just like so many potential pitfalls.
Right.
I thought we were the only three that talked about insomnia.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I guess there's other people that do too.
Unfortunately, I wish it was only us three, because I think that sometimes
Probably the world
we
would
give
better
up.
at
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it can really just make you more worried about sleep at the exact time that you want to be have a more relaxed approach towards sleep.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw this article, if I shared it with you, but it really, I came across this article about 6 months ago that really changed how I look at a lot of things. So basically, these researchers went to these like pre-industrial societies. One was in Bolivia, one in Tanzania, one in another African country, and they gave these people who lived in there these actigraphy devices that they were checking like how much they slept. And a couple of really interesting things came out of that. One was that on average, people slept from like between 5.4 to like 6.8 hours. So on average, about 6 hours of sleep, very similar to in our societies and every other society, by the way. But the other thing was that the sun would set typically around like 8 p.m. and they wouldn't go to bed at that time. They would go to bed like 11. And also like they would get up way ahead of the sun rising. So what really seemed to determine like when they went to bed and get up was more related to temperature, really. Like when it started getting like colder, people go to bed, and then when it got like the coldest point, a little after that, people got up to start busy. So like I think a lot of take home for me, but one of them was this thing whereby like temperature is a big thing, but also when you get up seems to be like really like that really seems to be the anchor, like the super important thing. And it's not maybe so related to light as we thought.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Like, yeah, I'm more about like we've already talked about like light and my opinions on light. Like I think this daytime light that's more important than the nighttime light. Sure. But when it comes to it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're always told that we should be falling asleep when the sun goes down and getting up when the sun comes up, right? And that kind of debunks that idea. But it also introduces this new idea that maybe temperature has more of a role than we think. So going on to temperature, I find that a lot of people do tend to have the temperature slightly too high, because we're used to like this constant air conditioned static room temperature during the daytime, and we might turn it down a couple of degrees at night, but whereas really I think our bodies want like this mid to low 60s, like the body wants to be cool at night, and I think when we're warm, that can make sleep more difficult. But then at the same time, that we don't have this variation anymore, right? We set the thermostat, and our bed is this same temperature all night long. So where are these cues for our circadian rhythm? We've already got this constant light during the day, no real variation, kind of constant temperature, and then the same at night. So if you think about it in that way, maybe it's no surprise that we're starting to like develop these poor sleep.
You know what? I have to butt in here. Like as you were speaking now. You know what's happening in my mind? I'm thinking like maybe there should be a thermostat setting that emulates like natural temperature regulation.
You can set it, or maybe it would help if you just turned the heat off at night, depending on like what climate you live in.
Right.
You'd have to have a measure of core body temperature. It's a little more challenging than
you might not want to.
So, but maybe somebody will figure that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually it's a great observation, and that would make a lot of sense.
That's interesting.
Yeah, make a lot of sense.
It's also interesting in terms of duration as well, right? That like there's this preconceived idea that we should be asleep for like a third of our lives, right? And when you take that away, and you're actually studying people that just sleep when they want to sleep, and they don't have any expectations or commitments or attempts to sleep for a certain amount of time, they're getting like 6 hours ish, and they're fine.
I've thought about that, like shifting the whole thing from spending a third of our lives to spending a fourth of our lives. It's really more a fourth of our lives. It's really close to, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Hey, listen. I think we may be rounding up this first segment. I think for our viewers, we talked about maybe spending some time talking about like challenging cases and whatnot, and then some other topics. But one more thing that I really wanted to discuss was sleep hygiene, right? very common, like everybody's heard about it. Maybe you don't know it's called sleep hygiene, but everybody's heard about it. And that's another part where a lot of people have different opinions, which are kind of the same, but different anyway. So let me share mine, which is the way I practice, is I tell people like, no, sleep hygiene, it doesn't work. You know, that whole thing, like keeping your room, dark and like, not drinking coffee and like, don't have a big meal before you go to bed and all these things. It just doesn't work. But then other people include basically the whole thing about like getting out of bed, which is stimulus control, in sleep hygiene, which makes it very confusing. But just your thoughts, like what do you think of sleep hygiene, and what are your general thoughts on this?
Well,
ahead, Martin.
all right, I would say, what is sleep hygiene? Because as you alluded to, you talk to one person and they'll say sleep hygiene is this, and you'll talk to another person, they'll say sleep hygiene is this. And one person's sleep hygiene may include some CBTI techniques which are grounded in evidence and work, and another person's might not. So it's hard for me to say sleep hygiene doesn't work, because there are some components to it I think are helpful. But if you have chronic insomnia and you're looking at sleep hygiene as the treatment option, nothing but sleep hygiene, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because sleep hygiene by itself doesn't cure chronic insomnia. And they use sleep hygiene as like the control group when they do research studies, because we know it doesn't work.
Exactly.
But I think it can be helpful when it's like packaged up into inside like CBTI. So when I work with clients, I do talk about sleep hygiene, but not until we've done like the bedtime restriction, stimulus control. Once all these real techniques that I know work, because I've seen them work. Exactly. When someone's confident in those techniques, then I can say, all right, and now just as a little side note, let's just run through some basic sleep hygiene, and just to see if there's anything there that could just like help improve a little bit, add a little bit salt, you know? Everyone that I work with, they've heard of sleep hygiene, and they come to me because they know it doesn't work. So they don't want me to sit there and talk about sleep hygiene because they know it all. They're the experts. People with chronic insomnia are the experts on sleep hygiene.
They've done it. They lived it. Yeah.
So my opinion is it doesn't work by itself. There are some components that can help, but they should never be the focus.
Absolutely. When I work with a client, it's one of the last things I talk to them about in my initial discussion with a client. And we go into sleep education, a bit of like circadian rhythm things, just kind of basic information, and then we talk about stimulus control and sleep restriction. Bedtime restriction. We go into that big time. And then I kind of finish up with, and one last thing. Right. Like, here's some things you're probably sick of hearing about. Sleep hygiene, you're in the grocery store, check out, there's the magazine. 10 Steps to Great Sleep. I'm the guy who always picks it up. I'm like, I got to see what this person says. I was like, don't worry. Oh, yeah, that's an easy thing to do. Or, forget the coffee or whatever. And I have like 3 cups a day. And I'm like, and I sleep fine. So, I kind of qualify it with that. Like, this hygiene isn't something that cures anything. It's something that kind of helps to prevent things. Like, you brush your teeth. It doesn't mean you won't get a cavity. It means like you might be less likely to get one, or you might delay one, or something like that. That's kind of the same thing with sleep hygiene. Yeah. It's the coffee, alcohol, smoking, activity, that kind of stuff. Just kind of a rundown of like kind of taking care of yourself, basically, is really what it boils down to. And it's a good thing, especially the caffeine. I'm really focused on the caffeine thing because it is such a kind of designer drug, and it kind of just stays in you a long time. And my antennas go up when I hear the, late afternoon latte kind of talk, or the energy drink things. And I'm just I kind of just keep my radar up for that. I'm like, you know what, maybe drop the last one. The 5 o'clock latte on your way home. How about we drop that one? Replace it with like bubbly water or something. Right. And then everything else, just leave it alone. It's fine. You want to have 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, that's fine. But like the 5 o'clock one, I'm kind of like, you're really working on your sleep now and you want to be successful. If it's no big deal to drop that one, let's just do that. Exactly. It's like a small little goal. Most people are pretty open about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I could do that. And I'm like, great, let's just do that. And that's probably in the sleep hygiene talk. That's probably like my most common thing to go into. How about you? What do you think?
I just want to butt in here. Yeah. Do you ever think that sleep hygiene could actually harm sleep? Oh, totally. And make someone's insomnia worse?
Absolutely, 100%. Because I think this happens all the time, in fact. I think what happens is, somebody randomly has a hard time sleeping, doesn't think about it. Well, now it's too nice, I can't sleep. The first thing they do is go online, see how can I sleep better. And then they hear that, oh, you should make sure your room is really dark, okay? Sleep hygiene tip, classic. And then they're like, they turned the room really dark. It didn't work. Now that has them worried, right? Yes. And then like, what's the next tip? Skip coffee.
Right.
Okay, they skip coffee, still can't sleep. Now they've given up a part of their life to insomnia. They've surrendered part of life to insomnia. They get more frustrated.
Right.
That didn't work, and then just escalate. Sleep tip after sleep after sleep. So I definitely think sleep hygiene can, most of the time, it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts people.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I raised that because I completely agree with what you're saying. Like you can try to implement all these techniques for sleep because you've read about them. Sleep hygiene. That's what my doctor told me. So many people, that's what their default advice is, right? And so you try this, but it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work because by itself it doesn't work.
Right. Hygiene doesn't
and that can make you more worried about sleep. But also some of the tips in sleep hygiene, they can actually not be helpful. I often see go to bed at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That one.
Keep a consistent sleep schedule.
Exactly. And
which includes this.
They're like halfway there. They're 50% right.
Yeah.
You know, like they say, go to bed at the same time, get out of bed at the same time. Getting out of the bed at the same time, very, very, very important.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't go to bed until you're sleepy enough for sleep.
100%.
Right.
So that in itself, that is really damaging, telling someone that they should go to bed at the same time every night. And that's like the main problem I have with sleep hygiene is that, just that, like that one rule, because you see it repeated time and time.
Especially if they're told to do that by their medical professional.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, someone they really look up to, like my doctor's telling me to do it, so I have to do it. Like it's very, and like you said, it just makes things worse.
Yeah, and it can be confused with CBTI. Then.
Yeah.
Like CBTI awareness is generally already poor. Like we know that. That's why we're talking about it and trying to get the word out. And once you start to explain a little bit more about what CBTI includes, people often say, oh, that's sleep hygiene. I've tried that before. Right. It didn't work.
Right.
But it's not. And so that's another reason why I think sleep hygiene can be actually damaging.
Yeah.
Because you can assume you've tried it, or you can think that it's CBTI when it's not.
Yeah. Right. True. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that maybe you could round up this first segment with, you know, as you're talking about this, like the guy who's staring at a little dog
on the wall guy. Yeah,
we could end
never forget him.
On kind of that note, on a little bit like unusual things we heard, but so I have two. One of them was actually about sleep hygiene, which I thought was funny. So I had this one patient who talked to me about all the things, like the laundry list, all the things she should try, you know, classic. And I'm just listening, and then I finally go like, you know, all the things you described is called sleep hygiene. And it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And she thought that was hilarious. She was like cracked. I started laughing. And at first I didn't really know, but I think in her mind she just saw herself doing all these things, which didn't work. And that was still funny. The other one, which is like a little tragicomic thing, but you know, on a note of like all the things people do to try to sleep. You know, I had this person I was interacting with on my YouTube channel, and she was like, I'm still not really sleeping well, and I'm in a hotel. And I was like, okay. Like, how I didn't know that you were traveling. Why are you in a hotel? It's like, no, I've just moved into a hotel so I could sleep better. And I was like, really?
Wow.
Oh my gosh. And then what happened? Well, the first 3 nights I slept great, but now everything's like normal again. I was like, but that just shows you what a great length people go to just sleep better. And but anyway.
Yeah.
I was just going to bring up like that dampen the mood a little bit, but I thought about like talking about like things like that. Do you have any interesting stories about like that? Or?
What I always find really interesting is there can sometimes be like a lot of resistance to implementing some of these techniques because they're really hard in the short term. They can even sometimes lead to less sleep.
And counterintuitive.
Yeah, and counterintuitive. How can my sleep improve if I spend less time in bed, for example? But when I get like these emails from people that have experienced the breakthrough, you know, that's what really is just so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, almost like when you were saying about this patient that talked about sleep hygiene, you said, well, none of that works. And then they laughed, right?
Yeah.
Because I think on reflection, they like knew it didn't work, but you were probably the first person to tell them that, give them that validation. And so when someone makes this breakthrough, they're like, oh, I implement these techniques and, maybe I don't need this much sleep. Like last night, I only got 4 hours of sleep, but I feel great this morning.
Yeah.
Because they were getting out of bed when they couldn't sleep. So that meant that their bodies knew, okay, we've only got this small window we can sleep. So they get a nice big chunk of sleep all at one time, instead of having this huge window, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. Right. And so you recognize it's just these little breakthroughs. That's what I find like really rewarding and really powerful when I work with clients, just like
Yes.
those little breakthroughs.
Absolutely.
Do you find a lot of people that are surprised? They're like, what's going on? I'm only sleeping 5 hours and I feel great.
Yeah.
You get that a lot,
Yeah,
right?
and then
I get that a lot.
Yeah, and people realize that their day isn't entirely dependent on their sleep at night as well, so that's when I know that I've made a breakthrough and this client's going to do well. When they tell me, I had a really bad night last night, but I just told myself, all right, it looks like I'm going to have a bad night. Maybe the day will be bad, maybe it won't, but I'll still get out of bed at the same time. And then tomorrow's a fresh start.
Right.
Like once that worry and once that pressure and the performance anxiety is kind of gone, that's when you've made that breakthrough.
Right. And that's when, actually, back to the sleep hygiene thing, I think it is a bit helpful at that point if someone is making progress and they have a rough night, to cope with maybe some residual sleepiness the next day. They don't do everything wrong. They don't sit around all day. They don't drink, gallons of coffee. They don't, chug a bunch of alcohol to make sure they fall asleep.
Right.
They still kind of take care of themselves. And I think and they don't take a big nap. So I think these are helpful things, and they kind of fall into the sleep hygiene thing a little bit, but it's more of like a coping thing. It's like, don't cope in the wrong way. If you're kind of tired during the day, get on with your day. Act like nothing happened the night before. You're everything is forward looking. It's not what happened. It's, here's what I'm doing during the day. I'm going to do my normal thing. I'm just going to keep doing the usual things that are generally good for my health and don't have any kind of reason to impact my sleep adversely. But you were also asking about things people do that don't help with sleep. So I have 5 that I go, okay, here are the 5. I say, okay, here, and I preface it with, here are things that in my experience working with people over the years, they're themes of things that people try that don't work.
Yeah.
Top of the list is they actually try to force sleep. Yeah. They try to will themselves to sleep. I said, that's top of the list. That doesn't work. That'll take you in the opposite direction. And the second one is they try to clear their mind and think about nothing. The whole blank slate mind kind of thing. It's not possible. You're going to always think about something, right? And then there's some mental strategies of guiding things out of your thoughts or working with them and all that. But the point I would try to make with them is, some people try to clear their mind completely. They just go, I'm going to think about nothing, just blank. And I go, and how's that work? And they go, well, it's not really, you can't really do it. And I go, exactly. So I tell people, don't try to clear your mind.
Yeah.
Don't even try that. Then I talk about boring themselves, staring at the dot on the wall guide, that sort of thing, reading the most boring thing you can find, or reading owner's manuals for gadgets around your house, and all these kind of counting sheep, it's the classic. The boring yourself thing doesn't work. It gets frustrating. Then I talk about alcohol. Some people turn to alcohol, unfortunately, and that's not good for your health in general. So, it's not your answer to sleeping better. So, don't go down that road. And then there's one more. What's the 5th one? I knew I was going to forget the 5. I'm older than you guys, so my memory thing. But anyways, I'll come back. I'll jump in when I remember.
It reminds me of that presidential. Do you remember that one? It's had something. It was I'm going to close 3 departments. And I was
Yeah,
it'll come to me. But anyways, so
I think that one big obstacle is just patience. Because I think the studies suggest that the average person who seeks CBTI has had insomnia for 10 plus years, right? So this is a really long time.
Right.
And so you want to improve your sleep really quickly, as quick as possible, right? But it took 10 years for your insomnia to get to this point now, where you're going through CBTI, for example, right? Yeah. So it's understandable that you want to get these results in 2-3 weeks, but it often takes longer. So it's really important to have these realistic expectations and understand that when it comes to bedtime restriction and stimulus control, it can take a good few weeks before you notice any improvement. So if you just do it on a couple of nights and then skip the next 3, for example, it's going to just delay it further. It really is just a case of having to be so committed and so patient and to really give it a good go. I like to say that if you say that you've tried CBTI and it didn't work for you, did you do it for 8 weeks? Did you do it nonstop for 8 weeks? Right. If you did, all right, maybe there's something didn't work out. It didn't work out for you. Let's explore this. Yeah. But if someone tells me that, I tried it for a couple of weeks, or I tried it for a few days, or I didn't do the getting out of bed things, that didn't work for me, or something like this, then you didn't really try CBTI, you know, because you didn't have that patience and the commitment, because it is hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But unless you've really got to see it through, you know, it's just this short-term pain that you have to experience in order to get like these long-term benefits. It's really, you use this analogy about climbing to the top of the mountain,
Yeah, exactly.
And there's going to be some stumbles along the way. You might get some scraped knees, but if you keep stopping to like try and figure out why you stumbled, or to put a Band-Aid on your knee, and you're never going to get to the top of that mountain, right? You just got to like keep your eyes focused on the prize.
You like use it forward moving.
Keep moving forward. There's going to be blips along the way, but if you stay committed, these techniques work. And yes, that's like a common obstacle. Like when we're talking about obstacles and things people do that don't work. My thing that people do that don't work is they don't do it. Like they don't implement it consistently, and it is really important.
Right. That's very true. That's very true.
Listen, two things that come up in my mind right now that I feel like we have to talk about is, you know, I think I usually say like 70 to 80% of people have success with CBTI. I think you could 80%. Like it's really most people do. How about this one? Do you think that if you believe you're among the 70% that are going to have success, you're more likely to become one of the 70%?
Maybe, but I find that a lot of people, especially when they've had insomnia for a really long time, they're convinced they're like the 20%.
The 30%.
Yeah, or the 30%.
And they can still have success.
Yeah, and so you have to be ready to change. You know, you have to be ready to implement the techniques and really commit to them. And it's understandable why people can be convinced that they're going to be by default in this group that it doesn't work for, because you've experienced insomnia for so long, and it's easy to think that you're unique. Whereas because we deal with people with insomnia all the time, we see so many similarities between individual patients and clients, right? We can recognize that it's almost always the same.
It is.
Just tiny little variations, but generally everyone's insomnia is really similar.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you're that person with insomnia for like 20 years, you think that you're the only person that has it, right? Because you're not talking to your friends at night time about how bad they're sleeping. When you're up during the night and all the lights in the street are off, you're convinced like you're the only person, you know, and you've tried the sleep hygiene, didn't work. You tried the sleeping pills, didn't work. Right. You become convinced that there's something unique about your insomnia that can't be tackled with CBTI. That can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, because that makes you anxious, and then that worsens your sleep. It's a cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah. One more thing, I think you'll like this one, or maybe not. We'll see. I just thought about this the other day, that for example, weight loss, diet and exercise works, right? Like if somebody really cut down on calories and exercised, what's the likelihood of success? 100%. Really 100%. Do you think it's the same thing with CBTI?
I think it's close. Yeah, I think it's close, and I don't have any studies to back up.
Neither do I. I just thought this thing like if somebody really, really, really did it,
because behavioral modification, it's completely behavioral modification.
Yeah.
When the diet analogy, it involves food intake, and that's not necessarily. I mean, it is kind of behavioral modification, but there's types of food, that would play into that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you switch from broccoli to cheeseburgers, that's going to be, maybe not get the results you want. But I think it's similar, and it's definitely, I think it's probably very close in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's really straightforward. It's very prescriptive. It's very CBTI. It's very structured, and the core, themes of like only wakefulness produces sleep, and the brain is hugely associative, and so it can associate your bed with alertness and frustration. And, these common themes are very straightforward if you think about it. They're very logical, very straightforward. But someone who's struggling with their sleep can be kind of grasping at straws, and they can be really in a tough place. And that, I think, might be why it, quote unquote, doesn't work sometimes as a person. Like you said, they're not ready for it. They're not ready to change and really kind of think this through logically. They don't feel like they can cope with whatever we're going to ask them to do. And it's really not that much, painful duration, short-term pain. It's just a little bit, and for some people, they just jump right into it and they succeed. I love those people that are just like a week later, they're just Like, what did you tell me? You know, did you put something in my coffee to make it non-caffeinated? They joke with you about it. But for a lot of people, they think it sounds maybe daunting to try to make this kind of behavioral change. And it's really not, especially if you find someone that really knows what they're talking about and can really get right to the core of the issue.
Yeah, so I think when I hear about the success rate of CBTI is like 70, 75, 80%, I'm like questioning how we're measuring this success rate. Like, other people that it was not successful for, were they compliant? Because really the only obstacles I see to it not working is compliance. So if you're not implementing the techniques, it's not going to work. Like, when I work with clients, if they implement the techniques, 100% of them see improvement in their sleep. 100%.
Right.
So my question is always, why is there this 20% that it doesn't work for? Like, I think we need to really explore that. Is it because they really did implement everything for like 2-3 months and there was really no improvement in their sleep? Because that needs more digging. Like, there must be something else at play there. Because I'm firmly believe that if someone implements the techniques and they implement it consistently and they follow the course of CBTI, then their sleep will improve.
So you basically agree that it's kind of like diet and exercise.
Yeah,
it works.
I don't understand how it can't. Like, let's take this as an example. How can the percentage of time you spend in bed asleep instead of awake not improve if you spend less time in bed at night?
Right.
How can spending more time awake during the day not make you more sleepy by nighttime? Just little logical snippets like this. How can they not work? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that gets into that quick question of what is success. Maybe some people just felt like, I'm not feeling better.
That's true. And some people might not be feeling as restorative as they hoped, but then at the same time, some people might have unrealistic goals for success. You know, like, they might say, my goal for success is 8 hours of sleep. And hardly anyone gets 8 hours of sleep.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's an unrealistic goal.
Exactly. So how are you measuring this success? So I think that the success rate is virtually 100%. If you're compliant.
That's kind of what I think too.
What do you think about if someone has untreated sleep apnea and insomnia, chronic insomnia? They're kind of talking if they're presenting with both. Is it possible to, get complete resolution of insomnia if their apnea is untreated? That's the breathing obstructions as you have. Okay, so sleep apnea, obstructed breathing and snoring and all that. What do you think about that? It does in my opinion, it's kind of like the airway is sort of like the first thing you always check when you're helping anyone with anything. Like, if they're not breathing well, if they're awake and not breathing well, it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters, right? Like, you get that person breathing. Like, that's first and foremost. Like, we're going to go, play golf. Well, you're not breathing well. Let's go take care of your breathing before we go play golf. It's sort of like the first thing. So when it comes to sleep, in my mind, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if their airway is having problems keeping open during the night, that kind of has to be dealt with first. So my question is, what do you feel about people who have like some of that snoring, sleep apnea going on and insomnia complaints at the same time?
No, that's a good question, and that's something I deal with like on a day-to-day basis in clinic. And I'll see. So let me put it this way: like in daytime, as you guys know, maybe some listeners don't know, I'm working in a sleep clinic where I see people mainly with sleep apnea, some with insomnia, and I also have like a YouTube channel, and I engage very much on social media to help people with insomnia. In sleep clinic, that's part of the intake. Is like I ask everybody like, so do you snore? Do you have difficulty breathing in sleep? And then it becomes like a judgment thing. Like, if somebody is like classic sleep apnea, snoring loudly, they wake up multiple times, they have trouble staying awake during the day, they fall asleep during the day, then of course they need to have a sleep study, and look at that. On the flip side, if they're like classic insomnia symptoms, they can't fall asleep during the day,
They're reliant on a sleeping medication.
Right, on sleeping medication, they snore maybe a little bit here and there and so forth, then I'm not too worried about it, and I don't do any sleep testing. But one more point, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot, Mike, is that there are definitely patients out there who have like pretty classic insomnia symptoms, and they also have sleep apnea. They have both, and then I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Let's do a sleep study, and then they have sleep apnea. Treat them. Yeah, that can cure insomnia too. Like, I definitely have patients who are like, they went on a CPAP and like their insomnia type symptoms were due to underlying sleep apnea. That definitely does happen.
And that's been studied, and I think maybe I think like, what's it, 40% that tend to be their insomnia issue tends to go away, but it leaves maybe a little over half that it doesn't go away. I can't remember the exact size. I should know what this is, but whenever anyone comes to me for help with their sleep, it's usually kind of an insomnia thing. I always ask about snoring.
Yeah.
It's just such a simple question to ask. Have you been told that you snore? Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Like a lot? Oh yeah. Like loud? Yeah. If they offer that information, yeah, my spouse says I snore. I'm pretty, or yeah, well, we don't even sleep in the same room anymore. Like that's kind of a sign that that's problematic snoring. And problematic snoring, probably warrants a sleep study and evaluation first. So I don't tend to go into the CBTI thing quickly with them. I tend to let me help you, give you questions to ask your doctor about snoring and sleep apnea, and kind of just take a look at that first. Because it's going to, in my opinion, in my experience, CBTI behavioral change, it kind of gets blunted when there's untreated sleep apnea of some degree. And that's actually a sign that I look for. If like you're trying, they're doing things right, everything seems to be good, but they're just kind of like not maybe realizing the positive effects. And then maybe you ask them questions like, about their sleep and what do they experience and all that, and during the daytime. And they say things like two that particularly come out to me. One is, are they sleepy during the day? Like to the point where they're kind of dozing off, taking naps, kind of thing. But the other one is at night, I ask them to characterize their sleep. And if they kind of are talking more like, I wake up a lot.
And fall back asleep quickly,
right?
Brief, that one.
A lot of brief awakenings. That's like a red flag. I'm kind of like, oh, any trouble falling asleep? No, I fall asleep pretty. I'm like, okay. But you're just awake a lot at night. Yeah. But it's not like a long stretch of wakefulness. No, it hardly ever happens. I just wake up a lot. So sleep apnea comes to mind, and of course the leg movement activity can be problematic for that as well. So a couple classic sleep disorders that are easy to test for and treat. I look for evidence of those because I feel like if I'm giving them bedtime restriction and things like that, that can be really challenging if someone's already pretty sleepy during the day. Yeah. Like even though it probably would help, I feel like they're less likely to try it, to implement it if they have some untreated sleep apnea going on. So that's just the only reason it's not. I don't say it's 100% in my experience, but it's close, obviously.
Yeah, I think the big difference is if you've got untreated sleep apnea, you're sleepy in the day. Yeah. You're sleepy in the day. When you've got insomnia, you're fatigued in the day.
Right.
And this is the big difference. So people with untreated sleep apnea, they'll tend to fall asleep really quickly because they are really sleepy because they're just not getting really good sleep during the night. But then they'll wake up, but then they'll fall back to sleep pretty quickly.
Okay,
Whereas someone with insomnia, they'll take a long time to fall asleep. Yeah. And when they wake during the night, they'll take a really long time to fall back to sleep. Yeah. And this is another reason why the sleep diary is so important, because you can see information like that. Like us as providers can see that from a sleep diary. So even if someone says, oh no, they may live alone, they may be snoring, but they just don't know it, for example. But then as soon as we see this sleep diary, we see they're falling asleep within 5 minutes. They're waking they remember waking, say, a dozen times in the night, but they only spent 5 minutes in total awake during the night. Right. Then things like that can be like red flags. Yeah. And you're not going to improve someone's sleep with CBTI if the problem is sleep apnea.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. I was thinking of maybe talking a little bit about, I think I'm really passionate about this one, like the problems in the world when it comes to insomnia. And there are many of them, very many of them. But let me just throw it out there. Like if you would pick maybe one, what's the biggest obstacle or problem, just biggest problem in the sleep world when it comes to insomnia?
That's a big question.
I know.
A big problem when it comes to insomnia, I think it's got to be the message that people get from, magazines at the checkout counter to their doctor, to their next door neighbor, anyone, is you got to get enough sleep. And enough kind of being defined as a number that's maybe closer to 8 than huge. Closer to 6, which we feel like is there's a lot of evidence that that's kind of normal. But then everyone is different even night to night. So this kind of unrealistic goal of getting enough sleep, I think, is the biggest problem when it comes to chronic insomnia.
Yeah, that is a really big problem because we see so much of the advice that we see or the information that we see is incorrect or inaccurate. Like, and I think the intention most of the time is good. Like, for people that don't have a problem with sleep, it's good for them to read messages to remind them, make time for sleep. You know, like if you're burning the candles on both ends, but you generally sleep fine, then it is a good idea to maybe make some more time for sleep.
Yeah, right.
So that kind of advice is well-intentioned, and it's good for people that don't have a problem with sleep. But the issue is the only people that are reading this information is people with insomnia. Yeah. And so this information isn't directed at people with insomnia, but people with insomnia are the people reading it. And this can lead to like more worry and anxiety about sleep. As we know, isn't helpful. It makes sleep more difficult. So that's like on the information thing. So yeah, I completely, totally 100% agree. My other thing that I'm passionate about is I think we have a real awareness problem when it comes to CBTI. Like people just don't know about it. And I wish that all these articles that said you need to get 8 hours of sleep instead said you need to read about CBTI, learn about CBTI, and share those techniques with people, you know, because they work, they're helpful, they're constructive. And even if someone doesn't implement it, just to make them aware of CBTI so they know about it, so they can maybe go to their doctor and talk about it. Right. And so many doctors don't even know about CBTI. So it's like a two-pronged problem. We have people with insomnia that don't know about the best treatment for insomnia. And we have doctors that are seeing people with insomnia that don't know what the best treatment for insomnia is.
Right. That's so true.
How about you?
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much summed it. I was just going to go where you went. But to say, I'm just going to kind of double down on it. Yes, the 8-hour message is terrible. Like everybody's like, you got to get 8 hours. And then the second part of that is like, you know, that message that if you don't get your 8 hours, you're going to get Alzheimer's or cancer or diabetes, and all these terrible things that are that just adds fuel to the fire. And then I just kind of agree with you there that, you know, still today, like it's 2019 and you have so much information online, etc. But when people have a problem, they usually, the first step typically is to talk to their doctor, I think, you know?
Right.
That's the big problem. Like going to med school, there's virtually zero education about sleep. There's just like on average, I think 4 hours, but that's probably mostly about sleep apnea. So that leaves like nothing for insomnia and CBTI. Right. So there's really the blind leading the blind situation there. Right. And I think that sums it up. I think that's
and I do think, you know, also with the doctors and CBTI, I think some of them know there's some things that can be done. They don't know exactly what. They just know that there's like this thing out there that can be done, and only psychologists can do it. And so then they have the issue of convincing their patient who's having some trouble sleeping, or they don't want to take their Ambien or Trazodone or whatever anymore, that they have to go see a psychologist. And I think there's still a lot of stigma with that.
Right.
Personally, I don't like that, because I think there are a lot of really good psychologists out there who can do really good psychotherapy, but CBTI is not really psychotherapy.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of doctors that feel like they are going to have to tell their patient that they need to go see a psychologist.
Yeah.
And I think they're a little hesitant to do that, and maybe rightly so. And so I just think that CBTI is so prescriptive and so effective that, you know, it can be implemented with help by people who are just very passionate and knowledgeable about the techniques incorporated in CBTI.
Mm-hmm. Which then leads me to what I also want to talk about, like the vision here. Like, you know, we know what the problem is. We know what the problem is, like, and I like to bring this up. Like in my case, you say that 30 years ago things were pretty much the same, which almost make me so depressed. Mm-hmm. but also at the same token makes me like feel like we got to do something. So how do we solve it? Like what should we be doing? Like how do we change things?
Well, you know, so when I got in the sleep field, I was reading about like, you know, Dr. Bootson and Dr. Spielberg and these guys that Spielman that were working on like stimulus control and sleep restriction, and this was like research from like the 70s, so pretty recent when I got in the field in the 80s. And I thought, this is just amazing stuff. And I had a psychology background, and so maybe I saw like the benefit, like this is behavioral and cognitive. It's a combination, and it made so much sense. And then it's like, then you try to find out, well, who offers it? Where do you do? And, you know, it was just kind of like crickets, you know, sort of like nothing. Okay. It's not, there's nothing there. And I thought, this is like really powerful stuff. I'm like, I was absorbing any study I could find. I was just like anything, you know, reading about and stimulus control and sleep restriction, all this. And I was like, wow, it's more than just like try not to drink too much coffee. There's like a lot more to it. And this is really great stuff. And still to this day, you know, I don't know why every single sleep center doesn't have a couple people doing CBTI for chronic insomnia people who are arguably 10 to 1 more common than sleep apnea people, easily.
So what should we do?
I think we just stay here forever, order pizza, and people can just call in with questions, and we'll just answer them for them. Do this, don't do that. That's a great question, and I think, you know, we're making a good start. Yeah. I think, you know, social media allows a platform for awareness to be spread, which, you know, has a plus side and maybe a not so plus side. I think there's some simple messages that I think that maybe are the best ones to try to promote. Instead of getting too complicated, start with like really simple messages, a couple things that anyone could do, like the morning time. That's a great one. Just the circadian anchor. And then maybe it's be active during the day. Like you do those two things and that can start to kind of get someone like recognizing that they can change some behavior and that maybe they feel a little bit better. Maybe their sleep is still terrible in their mind, but they feel like they're kind of feeling like they're getting empowered. They're getting like confidence that they can change some things. They can do some things a little bit differently that maybe have a non-specific way of just making them feel a little bit better. And then using that as kind of a launching pad for, you know, but what is that launching pad? Or how do you get onto that launching pad? I don't know the answer to those, but I don't know. You guys probably have more thoughts than I do.
Yeah, I can go. Like, I think, I mean, we all kind of started our own little things. Like, you know, I have a YouTube channel, you have a podcast, and you're starting a YouTube. You have your blog and things like that. And I think it's like you say, social media gives us opportunity to talk more than we have in the past, but so does it everybody else, who's a lot of people in the kind of the wellness sphere who are also well-intended, but also spread all these things that are not helpful. So anyway, like my thoughts, and I shared this with you guys before, but you know, one thing is like getting people like ourselves together, people that know about CBTI, who believe in it, and there aren't that many of us, which can be an opportunity because it may be easier to find those people, but kind of like coming together, starting some kind of umbrella organization, speaking with one voice, and like, you know, disseminating the message through social media. That's one thing. And then maybe use that same channel if we can like organize, like use that voice to also attack the root problem with medical education, you know. Maybe getting medical schools, maybe the ACGME, who sponsors medical education, to like realize this is a problem and like focus medical education on this. Like those are kind of, in my mind, the two like big things I'm hopeful about that hopefully can move the needle.
Yeah, I don't really think I have much to add. I think there needs to be more awareness of it, and I think that it's unfair for us to say that it's down to someone with insomnia to go out there and do the digging and find CBTI. Yeah. I think it's up to providers of CBTI and the medical community to push the message out there more, because it's such a missed opportunity that we're missing out on here. Like, what really gets to me is when I have clients come to me and they say, I saw my doctor and I was prescribed sleeping pills, or I saw my doctor and he gave me sleep hygiene. So this person with chronic insomnia did the right thing. They sought advice and help, but they just got probably in the not appropriate advice or the inappropriate help that wasn't helpful. Right. So I really think that maybe we need to start like on the medical side of things. Like you said, it's just, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that primary care providers right now are supposed to recommend cognitive behavioral therapy as the first line treatment when they recognize someone's got chronic insomnia. But that's not happening. So we need to ask why that's not happening, and we need to figure out why it's not happening and fix it. Because as far as I'm concerned, we're just kind of like a drop in the ocean compared to all the physicians out there that are seeing people with insomnia on a daily basis. If we can just get them to change their message to, let's look into CBTI. Yeah. Even if they don't have the time to do it themselves, or they don't have local resources, just to educate patients about CBTI, what it is and why it's helpful. I think that's really where we need to exert a lot more efforts.
I 100% agree, but I think I can actually answer your questions, meaning like, why isn't it happening? Well, it's like the guideline is from Academy of Sleep Medicine and NIH, etc., that CBTI should be the first treatment for, right? The American College of Physicians, exactly. Should be the first treatment. Like for a primary care physician, most of them don't know about this guideline. Secondly, they have no clue what CBTI is. Thirdly, they have no place to refer people to, you know? And that becomes a problem for them, because if they even tell a patient, like, the best thing to do is CBTI, then the patient invariably is going to ask, okay, good, how do I do that? And the doctor goes, I don't know. Well, then they're not even going to bring up CBTI because they don't know what to do. And so basically, education is key, but then also CBTI has to be so available that it's easy for that doctor to say, listen, you're going to do CBTI, and you're going to have a coach or a person like that can help you in the next week. You know, it has to be like, when we're going to get there, if we're going to get there, hopefully, but when we're I don't know, but that's it.
And I've also seen for health insurance plans, they'll have they'll have health coaching. And, you know, so I'm always like, you know, digging around, do they do sleep coaching? Oh, they do. And, you know, and I found a couple that do sleep coaching. And when you dig into what they're offering, it's mostly just sleep hygiene.
Exactly what I would think. Yeah.
So here's your insurance company. You know, doctor says, well, call your insurance company. They have a health coaching thing where you call your human resources department. Yeah, we have health coaching online as part of your insurance plan, and people don't want to pay any money. So they're like, this is great. I can go, you know, sleep coaching. And they find out that it's like, you know, a well-intentioned nurse on the other end of the line who knows a lot about health, but doesn't know much about, you know, sleep health.
But this actually, I would say this conversation makes me very encouraged, because that means that in health, in like insurances, and I thought about this before, like they probably would save a lot of money by bringing people like getting off medicine. But the fact that healthcare, like the insurance companies are willing to pay for you to see a health coach, that's encouraging. If we could just educate, you know, insurance companies that it needs to go a little bit further than that. It should be like somebody that has specific knowledge about CBTI. You know, that's a place to start too.
Yeah.
How confident are you that a health care person who's not necessarily passionate about helping people with insomnia do an effective job applying CBT concept strategies?
That's a good question, and I pondered it, and I think the literature supports it. Like at least that there's one study by the VA that you took people that were, I think they were social workers, or maybe not really a medical background, and you basically taught them CBTI, and it was effective. You know, if somebody's like super passionate, maybe we would be a little bit more effective. Maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, what was I going to say there was that I looked at that article and see like, so how much education did these people get? And it was like 3 days, you know? So I think you can definitely create a whole field of people that have like just 3 days of training CBTI can start doing it. And then if it doesn't, you know, it's not effective, then somebody that's like really, really into it like us could be kind of like the second line of defense. But I think it's doable.
So you have like these separate levels of like intensity or different skill base, you know, it goes up, you know, like how you call tech support, and they always go through the basics first, and if that doesn't work, then you get referred to the next person along. If that doesn't work that way, maybe that could work, but I just think we need that starting point, you know. And if the starting point is just taking people with another credential and tacking on some CBTI training to that, then that could be a good start. You know, we just need to make that start.
Agree 100%. I guess before we conclude here, last thing, Mike remembered is the fifth thing that doesn't work.
Yes, I did. I remembered. Okay, so the fifth thing that I remind my clients that doesn't work is you can't wear yourself out to sleep. You can't do push-ups till you drop. You can't go to the 24-hour gym and run and exhaust yourself, because mainly your body temperature goes up when you do that, and that doesn't fall quickly. So that's my fifth thing that I advise people of common things that don't work for sleep is trying to wear yourself out. It doesn't work. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to.
I think this is awesome discussion. And when are we going to do next time?
Soon.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Absolutely. This is great. This is really great. Very informative.